Does anyone remember the game show Wipeout? Of course you do, otherwise I have no idea why you would click on this video. I fondly remember watching contestants showcase worse athleticism than my grandmother, the two hosts that were both named John try and fail to be funny, and who could forget the iconic big balls. And just like any game show from the late 2000s to early 2010s, Wipeout was given a video game adaptation. And another. And another. And another. So Wipeout got a lot of games, and today we're going to cover them. Not all of them, unfortunately. There are some games that I either don't have the console for, or were mobile games now delisted from app stores. But looking at gameplay footage online, I don't think I'm missing out on much. Yeah, so as you could probably guess, these games are not very well made, but hey, an unpolished game can still be fun. How bad could this be? So, let's begin our journey with Wipeout the Game on the Wii. The game starts off with an actually decent looking intro video until we get into the actual thing. So we pick a character, they have different stats but in gameplay it barely matters. We get into the actual game and...
Hey everyone, I'm John Henson here with my good friend John Anderson, and Johnny, I only want to wipe out with you.
Oh.
Yeah, I know, you left me 4 voicemail
Oh no.
that said that.
So this game is not a looker, none of them are. But that's fine as long as the gameplay is good. So how is that gameplay? The game works like this. 4 contestants try to complete the obstacles in as fast of a time as possible. Players have 3 tries to complete each obstacle, and if they fail all 3, then they are given a time penalty. While one player is running, the other players are able to shoot balls at the screen to either stun the player or activate obstacles around them. That sounds pretty simple, but I think you can already tell what the main issue is. First of all, the controls feel stiff and sluggish at the same time. It's kind of a miracle. It feels like every action from running to jumping to stopping has a half-second delay. And the physics, well,
Painful to watch.
they just don't work. In a really funny way though. It's hilarious to watch players just break everything because they dare jump on the obstacle, or get flown 30 feet in the air just because they got hit with a tennis ball. What adds to this are the computer players who are really stupid. Forgetting to jump, walking straight into an obstacle, even turning around before the end and jumping back to the start. What even happened here? The way some of these obstacles work almost make you think that the developers had these poorly made physics in mind, with terrible hitboxes and weird timings, and you'll often get stunned repeatedly, getting hit by an obstacle and then hit again before you can get up, and then again, and then again. The like 5 different lines the announcers can say every time you fall gets old really quickly, but what doesn't get old really quickly is watching the characters ragdoll and glitch through the floor. Obstacles occasionally vary between sessions, but not by much. So the only real way a session of Wipeout will feel different from the last is your difficulty setting, though also not by much. A higher difficulty in the qualifier round will either extend an obstacle, merge 2 possible variations together, or maybe, very rarely, actually add something to an obstacle to make it harder. It doesn't really feel harder, just longer. The camera during the introduction doesn't even account for the extra obstacle length, and sometimes, the second half of an obstacle on a higher difficulty won't even have targets to shoot at, so the other players will just sit there. Maybe getting a few shots in, but not many since you can block shots by crouching. Round 2 is the sweeper. Oh, the sweeper. You were always my favorite part of the show. It works fine here, though the hitboxes are abysmal. It's a game of survival, where the players who don't get first place each round have to replay the round, adding time to their clock. Higher difficulties just make the sweeper rotate. Round 3 is the only one that significantly changes between difficulties, having to maneuver while dizzy on easy, survive another sweeper on challenging, and make it through the double cross on expert. This acts similarly to the sweeper, where the players who don't get first each round have to replay the round, which adds more time to your clock. And all that time matters for the wipeout zone, where your current placement determines how much of a head start you get on the wipeout zone's separate timer. I really like this idea, as it rewards those who have done well so far, while still giving the players who have done poorly a chance to catch up, since everyone's timer is reset. Another thing I like about the wipeout zone is the shooting. Here, everyone only gets one shot per obstacle per player, but the shot is always a knockout, so you really want to focus on your aiming, accounting for the weird delay and making your shot count. And if you are the player who's currently attempting the obstacle, you gotta be on your toes, knowing that letting your guard down for even a second can mark the end of an attempt. The obstacles in the Wipeout zone aren't anything special, though I really like the barrel one. It always led to some really funny moments. Higher difficulties in the Wipeout zone just extend the obstacles to be longer, but the obstacles themselves otherwise don't vary. And that's the whole game. You can unlock more characters and outfits for those characters by playing through the 3 difficulties, even unlocking the show's hosts. There's also a challenge mode where you try to get the fastest time on a certain variation of the qualifier or the Wipeout zone obstacles, but besides that, there isn't anything else to do. This game is very little content, and I played through all 3 difficulties in less than 90 minutes. With arbitrary and broken motion controls, only 1 to 2 animations for most characters including the hosts, voice lines and music that repeats or cuts off suddenly, poorly made controls, poorly made physics, poorly made obstacles, no content. Why do I love this game so much? Well, for one, it supports up to 4 players, which is great. Any bad game can become the next game of the year when you can laugh at its stupidity with friends. Hell, I play this game all the time with my friends. Well, not all the time. Yo, you wanna play Wipeout the Game?
What the hell is wrong with you?
And another thing, by far the most important, it's just plain fun. That's all that really matters in the end. And man, is it fun. Sometimes you don't need to play a AAA masterpiece to have a good time. You can just find some shovelware garbage, a group of friends, and 4 Wiimotes. So that's Wipeout the Game. And as you would imagine, Wipeout was followed by Wipeout 2. Oh yeah, the game got a DS version. So here's Wipeout the Game on DS, and if you wonder why the footage doesn't look good, it's because the software that lets me record 3DS games doesn't let me record DS games, and I just bought a new Wii U. So if you think I'm spending $200 on a 3DS with a physically modded capture card, then you sound weirder than the guy currently talking about Wipeout on the DS. So this version of the game has even less content, this time only having a single mode where the obstacles randomly vary in difficulty, worse controls because they decided what was originally 2 buttons needed to be split into 4 buttons, and physics that are well, I don't know what you expected. What's weird is how they changed the format. You see, instead of 4 players competing for the fastest time across every course, you instead have 8 players competing for times, where the slowest half of the players are eliminated after every round. That's right, you actually have to play well or you will get eliminated early on. You don't get to see the other contestants run, only their current times on the bottom screen so you know what place you're in. In fact, the only time you get to see another contestant in person is the sweeper. But what about round 3, you probably aren't asking. There is no round 3. It just does the qualifier, sweeper, and then straight to the Wipeout zone, which is painfully easy. The double cross is now a qualifier obstacle, but nothing else from the Wii version of round 3 remains. Well, if they had to pick a round to remove from the game, at least they chose round 3 and not some other, more iconic round. Damn you, John Cena. Most of the obstacles are just easier versions of the ones on the Wii, since the physics are a lot simpler here and things don't break as much, and because you can only move left or right. Though there are a few obstacle variants exclusive to the DS version that would have been great on the Wii. That's pretty much it though. It took me only 20 minutes to see pretty much everything this game had to offer, except for the challenges which are like the Wii version. And now the credits are in the options menu instead of being its own button on the main menu. I'm telling you, this is a whole new game! The only thing I could say that this has above the Wii version is that the loading times are practically non-existent. On the Wii, you were spending more time watching Ballsy dance in the corner than actually playing the game. The biggest issue I have with this version, besides its many flaws, is that there is no multiplayer whatsoever. Come on, a party game without multiplayer? Don't tell me that in the year 2010, after stripping so much away from what was already a bare-bones Wii game, you couldn't even try to add at least a 2-player mode? And you're still wondering why this game now sells for like $5? Moving on. Alright, now it's time for Wipeout 2. Wipeout the Game was only released for Nintendo platforms, but Wipeout 2 also got a release on the Xbox 360, PS3, and even mobile. Though the mobile version came out 3 years after the other versions and only a week before the TV series ended, so, you know, a little bit late. But perhaps Wipeout 2 was made with a higher quality in order to meet the standards of the HD consoles, right?
Welcome to Wipeout, everyone. All right, let's see what the qualifier's looking like for our contestants.
I think I'm gonna throw up. So this game looks way worse than Wipeout the Game did. Like, man, did they not care. Maybe the developers thought that Xbox and PS3 players would be satisfied because they get to see John Henson in glorious 720p. But on the Wii, we already had much better looking models from the previous game. This is a ridiculous downgrade. While Wipeout the Game was 3D, this one is fully 2D, with you only being allowed to move left or right. Actually, saying that you can move left is being generous. You think that turning Wipeout into a 2D platformer would be easy on the controls, but oh no, it can never be that simple. It takes forever to slow down or come to a stop, and you can't turn around, just slowly backpedal. Also, the ragdoll physics are gone. It's just boring physics with wonky hitboxes. In another downgrade from the original game, you don't get to interact with or even watch your opponents, just see their times at the end of each round. Though you can see them during round 2, just not interact with them. But in round 3 you get to see one of your opponents and barely interact with them outside of bumping into them a little bit, and they can control your camera, which can be frustrating, but you could still interact with them. Wipeout the Game on DS also had no interaction with your opponents, but in that game, you actually had to play well or you can get eliminated. That's not even the case here. Because of the fact that almost everything relating to your opponents is skipped over, this game actually takes the same length to fully complete as Wipeout the Game, a whopping 90 minutes, even though this game had 8 episodes instead of just 3 difficulties. And as a side note, there's no random variation in the courses. Each episode has its own predetermined qualifier, which is probably the most variety you'll see between episodes, because it's the only thing that's truly unique to an episode. Round 2 and 3 depend on whether you're playing an episode that takes place in the summer or the winter. In the summer, round 2 is the sweeper, a much less interesting version of the sweeper from Wipeout the Game that never changes in any way. In the winter, it is the ski lift, which is pretty much the same thing as a sweeper, except instead of the obstacle spinning around, you do. The longer you survive, the more seconds are taken off of your overall time, which can be really overpowered. There's actually another interesting way of taking your time off your clock: rings. They can be found throughout the course and are usually in harder to reach areas, and collecting one takes a couple seconds off your clock. It's actually a really cool idea, but adds to a problem across the whole game. It's way too easy. Your opponents absolutely suck, and there isn't even the excuse of them not being programmed well. The game devs just decided to give them terrible times, and the way some of these obstacles were designed makes them way too cheesable. Just look at some of these clips that I'm showing you now. Anyway, round 3 is either the Bruise Ball in the summer or the Wipeout Ice Arena in the winter. In both cases, you race against one of your opponents while barely interacting with them and dealing with the camera that has no idea what it's doing. Falling lets you respawn, but with a time penalty, which would be fine except for the fact that, as previously mentioned, the camera has no idea what it's doing. The Wipeout Zone has a total of 4 variations, with Wipeout Zones A and B alternating during the summer episodes, and Wipeout Zones C and D alternating during the winter episodes. They aren't anything special except for the mega big balls! Okay, forget everything I said, this game is a 10 out of 10. That's pretty much the whole game. There isn't even a challenge mode like before, so the 8 episodes are all there is to do. There are so many more issues I have with this game, but let me just mention 5 more real quick. Some rings are placed in really easy spots, kind of defeating the whole point of their existence. Each of the announcers are only given a single animation that just keeps looping whenever they speak. The Wipeout Ice Arena starts with the players getting dizzy, kinda like round 3 of Wipeout the Game on easy. But after a quick uncontrollable cutscene, they're back to normal. The outro of each episode has no music or sound effects, just complete silence while the announcers talk. And lastly, this clip. They left in a blooper by accident.
For John Anderson and Joe Wagner, I'm John Henson saying good night and big balls. And I'm John Henson saying good night and big balls.
Hey, you know, this game might be terrible, but at least you get to enjoy it with all of your friends. Wait, there's only a 2-player mode? How do you go from 4 players in the original to only 2 players now? Pretty dumb for a party game, but hey, I doubt I could convince more than one person to play this game with me anyway. Also, there's a DS version. Somehow they made it worse. There's also a 3DS version. Imagine if I owned these. Do you think I'd still be alive today? It's time for Wipeout 3. Now, I only have the 3DS version of the game, but luckily there are only a few differences between the 3DS version and the Wii version, and I will list the relevant ones now. The multiplayer on 3DS has you take turns while it is in split screen on the Wii, and the second major difference...
Hello and welcome to a very wintry Wipeout. Johnny, the weather out there is cold enough to make...
Ballsy sewed everyone's mouth shut on the 3DS. In comparison to the previous games in the series, this game has a lot more going for it. A ton of characters, now including children. Do their parents know? Accessories that give you stat boosts, a shop to buy characters and accessories, 12 episodes that each have their own themes, trophies for completing certain challenges, quick time events for some reason. John Henson says pwn a few noobs at one point, and the best thing to come out of the Wipeout games, Mr. Doodle. I would die for you, Mr. Doodle. I hope you know that. This gameplay is pretty similar to Wipeout 2, only instead of the camera being a side view, it is now from behind the player. Besides that, it mostly plays the same, though the controls and general feel of the game is significantly better. You also now have a health bar, and the lower it is, then the harder you'll be hit by obstacles. It really seems like the devs tried with this one, and they definitely ended up with the best version of the Wipeout formula so far. However, this game has one big central problem. It feels mindless. For one, every round feels the same. Round 1 and the Wipeout zone are pretty much the same, but that's to be expected. But with round 3, usually the most unique one of the bunch, it's now the exact same as the rest of them too. Now the only unique one is round 2, and sometimes even this round is just a standard course. When it isn't a standard course, it's a survival round like you'd expect, where more time is taken off your clock the longer you stay alive, with a lot more variations compared to the previous games too, which is a plus. But really, the clock doesn't even matter because for some reason, there's no total time that's tracked between each round. Each round has a separate clock, and the only exception is when round 2 is a survival round, but that doesn't really matter because your clock gets reset for round 3 anyway. So how do you win or lose, you may be asking? You see, that's the neat part. You can't lose. No matter how bad your time is, you will always do better than your opponents, whose times you aren't even able to see, as well as not being able to see your opponents ever, for that matter. And so you will always win at the end of an episode. I mean, what is even the point then if you can't lose? Clearly, I must have seen something in this game when I was younger, because I am absolutely swimming in coins. I guess you can try to beat your best times? In the previous games, time trials were an optional thing, but in Wipeout 3, it's the only game mode you have. I guess that's what the rings are for, which, by the way, are incredibly plentiful and sometimes almost impossible to avoid, only adding to this game's mindlessness. And while Wipeout 2 often has obstacles with timings designed to punish you for just holding right, Wipeout 3 does the exact opposite, where the best strategy is to just hold forward the whole time. It's hard to even really enjoy the wipeouts when they do happen because, similarly to Wipeout 2, the physics aren't really anything special. This aspect might be even worse than Wipeout 2 because the replay camera is the worst in the entire series. There were occasionally some funny moments, but I don't think anything could top the original. I really wanted to like this game, seriously I did. I could see why I used to enjoy it so much a decade ago, because it is by far the closest game to being good in the series so far. But it's held back by an issue that the original game didn't have. Wipeout 3 is just uninteresting, which is, in my opinion, the worst thing a game can be, and it is a problem that Wipeout the Game, for all of its flaws, didn't have. If the developers just gave this formula one more chance, just one more game in the series, to fix some of Wipeout 3's glaring issues, and add a couple more mechanics along the way, then maybe the Wipeout series can end with the game worth remembering. And luckily for us, they did make one more game. Our last game today is Wipeout Creating Crash, and we'll specifically be covering the Nintendo Wii version. This game plays very similar to Wipeout 3, as in it's basically the same game with some new features and tweaks. But were those changes enough to solve Wipeout 3's biggest problems? Well, surprisingly, yes! Before I start listing all the improvements, an extra note. Both Wipeout 3 and Creating Crash have a difficulty selection. There's the normal difficulty, and then there's black and blue, which increases obstacle speed and gives higher time penalties. My entire playthrough of Wipeout 3 was on black and blue difficulty, and one of my biggest complaints was how the game was too easy, even on this higher difficulty. Similarly, for Creating Crash, I also played the entire game on black and blue, so keep that in mind when I talk about this game's difficulty a little bit later in comparison to Wipeout 3. Alright, here we go! Starting right off the bat, we have power-ups. You basically get a random stat boost at the start of every round, such as running speed or higher health. It keeps things feeling slightly different and fresh between runs. While you can't get eliminated or lose at the end of an episode, you can now see your opponent's times after each round, meaning that there are specific times to shoot for if you want to get first, second, or third for each round instead of just racing yourself. There is now a Mrs. Doodle. They took my favorite character and made another one. Round 2 is now always a survival round. They didn't get lazy like last time and make regular courses, with even more variation in the type of survival round as well. There's even a new mode called Wipeout Max, where you play through as many randomly generated courses as you can, which get harder and harder until you fail to beat the target time. That's awesome! There are also some smaller changes that really go a long way. Replays are now optional, though the replays are by far the worst looking in the entire series. I mean, look at this. This is embarrassing. The hosts now have more lines they could say, so you don't end up hearing the same lines back to back. In fact, there were some things they said that managed to get a chuckle out of me. You can now mash A to swim and climb faster, which I'm really surprised wasn't already in Wipeout 3. Then there are the changes made to the difficulty. You have a default of 2 max health rather than like 5. Obstacles hit harder in general, and you'll probably find yourself getting comboed pretty often. Keep in mind that this is all in the context of playing on black and blue, but I wouldn't be surprised if things are still pretty hard on normal difficulty as well. Obstacles are now actually timed to punish you for just holding forward, which is great. This game is actually pretty hard, and there were certain obstacles especially that were kicking my butt because I kept going into them with the same playstyle as Wipeout 3, which will absolutely not work. You also have to be worried about being misaligned with the course as a result of how certain obstacles hit you, such as with the big balls. In general, this game is much harder than Wipeout 3, and is the perfect difficulty that I wanted for a game like this. I was actually having fun? I haven't felt this since the original Wipeout the Game. And there's still one more feature I'd like to mention. It's in the game's title after all, an entire course creator. First of all, the creator of the show, Matt Kunitz, calls me a gamer, so we're already off to a great start. The course editor is really simple, which I guess is something I would expect. You can unlock course parts with money and cycle through obstacles sorted by difficulty, meaning that the only thing I use this course creator for is for making as many obstacles as I could on max difficulty. It's great. You aren't really given that many options, nor are you able to combine obstacles or design your own or do anything cool like that. Originally, you could have been able to send courses to friends via codes, but I don't really have any way to test that, as even if the Wii still had online functionality, there's probably not a single other person in the state, nay the country, that is playing this right now. This game didn't really need a course creator, at least in the way it's implemented here, but I imagine that Wipeout 3, but we fixed everything, probably wouldn't be a good title to sell to kids. But yeah, Wipeout Creating Crash is actually good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's anything close to great, this is still like a 6 out of 10 at best, but that puts it above every other game in the series, and it's decent enough that I wouldn't really categorize it as shovelware anymore. You did good, Wipeout. You did good. And that's the end of our journey. Along the way, we've bounced on big balls, gone hit by sweepers, and wiped out more times than you can count. These games aren't, very good, but it's certainly not like their existence took away from society or anything. The fond memories of Wipeout the Game, the quick sessions of the DS version from time to time, Wipeout 2, the car rides with Wipeout 3, all ending with Creating Crash, which finally understood and managed to achieve what Wipeout is supposed to be. A fun little activity where a red ball dances in the corner the entire time while you keep getting hit by metal bars covered in foam. Now all we gotta do is wait for TBS to finally release Wipeout 5, where they remove the sweeper again because they hate fun and every playable character is John Cena. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, yada yada yada. I mean, if you made it all the way to the end, you must have enjoyed it, right? Thank you all for watching, and oh boy, I've always wanted to say this. This is Ready Dude saying goodnight and big balls.